All 50 Republican senators voted today that there should not even be a debate on the voting rights bill, the For the People Act. That also meant that Republicans didn't even consent to even talking about a different version of the bill, like, for example, the significantly reduced iteration of the bill proposed by conservative Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Senator Manchin has been the focus of so much attention on this issue because of the peculiar angle he took on this thing. It wasn't just that Manchin said he didn't want to vote for a voting rights bill unless it had Republican support. He said that, but he also expressed this relentless and sort of inexplicable optimism that some Republicans would support voting rights in the end. When he wrote his op-ed in his hometown paper recently expressing his opposition to any voting rights bill that didn't have Republican support, that was sort of an implicit criticism of his Democratic colleagues in the Senate for writing a voting rights bill that no Republican senator could support. Senator Manchin then put his theory to the test, though. He wrote his own version of a voting rights bill, actually showing his own ideas, his concept of the kind of bill he thought Republicans rightfully should support and should be expected to support on voting rights. Senator Manchin drew up his own proposal, what he thought should get Republican votes. The Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, responded by calling Manchin's bill, or his proposed bill, quote, rotten. And then today, Republican senators, all 50 Republican senators, voted to not even consider what Joe Manchin put forward. So does this change Senator Manchin's mind about any of this? Does it shift his idea that no voting rights bill should pass if it doesn't have Republican votes? Now that he sees the way that Republicans are approaching this issue in terms of deciding what they're going to vote for, what they're even going to vote to debate, what they're going to vote to even hear, does this change his mind about whether or not a voting rights bill must have Republican votes if it is going to be a legitimate approach to this issue that deserves his support? We don't know. Senators leave at the end of this week to go home for a 2-week-long July 4th recess. What senators hear from their constituents when they're at home about the importance of voting rights, that may be determinative here as to whether this is now over or whether there might be a next step. At home in Phoenix, Arizona today, this was the scene at the offices of Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema. She is the other conservative Democrat who's been a real holdout on this issue, also insisting that since Republicans really ought to support voting rights, Democrats should give up on it if they don't. I know. And her constituents clearly know. In addition to these visits at her office today, Senator Sinema is also facing ads like these ones. Running on Arizona TV stations, just blasting her for not being willing to get it done, for not standing up for voting rights. Now, I don't know how this is going to end, but I do know that Republicans in the states are going maximalist with their position on this issue. To the point where they literally aren't ashamed to have the dude who makes movies about Nazis on the moon and aliens doing 9/11 becoming the official documentarian for their effort to promote an election fraud narrative about Arizona, because they need their election fraud narrative to bolster not only Republican disrespect for election broad strokes, but specifically to bolster Republican efforts in all Republican-controlled states now to rescind voting rights and make voting harder. They are going for a maximalist conception here. Senate Republicans in Washington know that as long as the filibuster is there, Democrats have no options in terms of backing up voting rights. Clear on that, the Republican Party being clear on that in terms of whether there's going to be any federal protection for voting rights, clears the field for Republicans in the states to go maximalist and shamelessly as far as they can on this issue, to make voting as restricted as possible, to target voting restrictions and the administration of elections in a way that is maximally partisan to their advantage. And so they proceed, unless Democrats can get their heads around the fact that this is what they're up against and fight this same kind of fight on the same kind of terms.